The Seventh Seal is a 1950s classic by Ingmar Bergman and is regarded as one of the greatest films of all time. Set in medieval Sweden, the movie follows the story of Antonius Block, a knight who, after returning from the Crusades and finding his home country devastated by the Black Plague, challenges death to a chess match for his life. The film is richly detailed with medievalisms that correlate with historical reality. However, at its core, the film deals with the theme of death and how a deeply religious society comes to terms with the existence of God. Throughout the entire film, Antonius questions the existence of God, reflecting the loss of faith and purpose that people had to experience. Medieval Europeans were deeply superstitious, and religion had played a long-standing and important role in everyday life. The devastation caused by the plague had shaken those long-standing morals and faith in the church. People during that period, like Antonius, had to grapple with their own mortality and the reality that faith had little to no effect on their situation. As he and Squire Johns travel throughout the countryside, they meet an array of characters who all deal with the massive loss of life that resulted from the Black Death in their own way. This is seen with the characters of Joff and Mia, a pair of traveling jesters who entertain the villagers amidst a crisis. Similar to real life, medieval jesters were responsible for entertaining the townsfolk. Joff and Mia's inclusion in this is meant to reflect the sense of ignorance and indulgences that people had often indulged in, often entertaining themselves to distract themselves from the tumultuous situation they were surrounded by. This jovial scene is interrupted by a procession of hooded men who arrive at the town square, whipping themselves as they go. The leader calls out the indifference and the sins of the villagers who entertain themselves as the world falls apart around them. These are the flagellants, a movement that became particularly popular in Western Europe, specifically Germany. Their primary purpose was to cleanse themselves of sins through extreme acts of devotion and self-flagellation. They viewed the death as God's punishment to humanity for not being faithful enough. And though their inclusion in this film may be considered an anachronism, since there is no historical evidence of the flagellants being present in medieval Sweden, it serves to showcase the rise of extreme religious rhetoric that emerged after the Black Death and served as a coping mechanism for people to justify their faith in God and to explain the tragedies that had occurred as a result of the Black Death. Contrasting the fanaticism of the flagellants, Antonius is agnostic about God. He holds on to whatever little faith he had. However, his experiences during the Crusades and throughout the film make him constantly question the existence of God. His Squire Johns, on the other hand, is completely opposite from this. He's already come to terms with and has accepted the fact that God doesn't exist. He has concluded that ultimately everything is meaningless, and when one dies, there's nothing. This conflict comes to a head during the witch-burning scene, where Antonius' lingering faith clashes with John's nihilistic acceptance. In the beginning of the film, the townspeople believe the girl to be the source of the plague, and this really reflects how blind faith and superstition made it ultimately easier for people during this period to prosecute minorities such as Jews and Gypsies and blindly sentence people based purely on paranoia. Before the girl is sentenced, Antonius tries to see God through the girl's eyes, but all he can see is terror. Johns, by contrast, is only concerned with the here and the now, believing the girl to be just a girl. He tries to convince Antonius of this as they watch her burn. As Johns, Antonius, and the rest of the characters make their way back to Antonius' manor, they eat supper together and are met with death. We don't really learn what happens to them, and their ending is a little bit ambiguous. However, in the final shot of the film, as Joff, Mia, and their son are the only ones to survive, Joff looks over the horizon and spots Antonius and the rest of the characters, silhouettes, dancing while following death. This imagery is meant to be a reference to the Dance of Death, an allegorical art style that emerged during the Middle Ages after the Black Death. It was created by artists to symbolize the universality of death and its effects on all social classes. Just as how the Black Death affected rich and poor alike, here, in the last shot of the film, it ultimately proves the film's point, that death comes for all.